The Fleetwood Area School District and Dr. Miller held a second community forum on November the 8th to hear feedback from the community about the choices the district has in regards to financial, enrollment, and school condition issues and matters.
Just a real quick show of hands. How many of you were at the first session? All right. Give us a little bit of perspective so we have a little bit of mixed group, which is fantastic. I really appreciate adding to the group. I really appreciate those who came back. So obviously we didn't do that bad of a job in the first one. Some returned, but then we added to the group as well. For those who were not at the first one, if you have not seen the information from the first one, I'll put a real quick plug in. We do have right on our district web page. We have all of the handouts that were used, the PowerPoints that were used, as well as a video recording of that evening's meeting. So we have those things if anybody wants to go back a little later after the fact. Additionally, we once again have students from the high school who are here and will be recording the meeting this evening. Again, for those who were unable to attend and can sort of push that out to make sure the community is as informed as they want to be. Just to give a real quick, anybody that's I'm the superintendent here in the district, and I started about a year and a half ago in the district, and one of the pieces when I first came into the district, one of the questions or one of the conversations centered around the idea of enrollment, and what are we going to do about our enrollment, and where should we go, and what does this mean? My answer almost immediately was, well, we need to take the time and go through an enrollment and demographic study. And that sort of was the culmination and what brought us to the last meeting and step one of the process of getting community input related to what happened. So this evening, and what we did is we contracted that work with Thompson Associates. So we have James Thompson here who's going to talk to you in a moment. And in conjunction with Thompson Associates, we use Pennsylvania Economy League, and we have Jane Thompson from Pennsylvania Economy League here this evening. So they are going to be our facilitators this evening, take us through the next step of the process, a little bit of a repeat from last time in the beginning just to bring us all back up to speed, and then once again try and take us from the community input we collected last time and try and drill that down to continue to get input of the group. The culmination of this work is our belief or our expectation that then we will take this work to the December school board meeting, and they will do a presentation at the December school board meeting with recommendations based on the input from the community and what was found in the study, and then basically it's up to the school board to look at all that information and make a final determination of where to go from here, if that makes sense. Okay. Once again, I thank you all for coming out, and at this point, and before I go any further, one of the key important details, the bathrooms are right out that door on the left-hand side. All right, because as soon as I stop, somebody laughs. Right out there on the left-hand side, Mr. Cachupo, they're on lockdown soon? All right, thank you. Just because you're there, that's just great. That helps us a lot. But anyway, again, thank you for coming out. Truly appreciate it. And with that, Jim?
Well, there was a Forum 1, and at the Forum 1, we always call that the foundation of knowledge because we try to get a problem statement out and talk to you about what is the current condition of the buildings in the school district? What is our professional opinion of the student capacity of each of the buildings? We do a complete walkthrough of all of your buildings and do an educational assessment. And we reported out on our findings. The Pennsylvania Economy League did a 10-year enrollment projection, but that was backed up by a complete demographic analysis of your community, including an analysis of housing growth in the community. So they've spent quite a bit of time and energy. And I'm going to give you a little refresher on that tonight. So it doesn't matter if you weren't here the first time, you won't be lost because I'll do a little refresher on some of the pieces that we did at the last meeting. Technology. So it appears. Let's make sure we're at the top and not the bottom.
Well, you keep tap dancing and I'll figure it out.
All right. You just page us down one page. There we go. So tonight we're going to speak to the financial issues facing the district, enrollment projections versus school capacity. Roger, thank you. There, see? All right, we got that out of the way. No more technology. The school condition assessment, so we did a school condition assessments, but it was based primarily on the work that the school maintenance staff has done to pull together the listing of needs by building. Then we're going to look at 3 district-wide options. And at the end, for those of you that were here before, you know we do a small group, focus group discussion at the end, and then each table reports out to the rest of the group. So we're going to talk about those 3 options and get your opinion on where you think the district should go going forward. We'll talk about next steps, address any questions that you have, and that's the evening. These are some of the challenges that are facing the district. The retirement system has not been properly funded statewide, so the cost for the PSERS, or the retirement system for retired school employees, that contribution has been rising every year for years. The medical insurance costs are rising. They're rising faster than inflation, but the revenues in this district remain flat, and that's largely due to the limited amount of development and growth in the community. The school capacity, as you'll see from the analysis, far exceeds the current enrollment of the school district, and the projected decline in enrollment is continuing a 10-year trend in the school district. So over the last several years, the enrollment has been declining, and we project that that will continue. In addition to that, the school district has identified about $15 million worth of renovation costs at the various buildings, and that is on the horizon. So they're already making arrangements for to incur borrowing to pay for some of these renovation costs, but the question is, can some of those renovation costs be shed? So we'll start off with the enrollment versus school capacity, and then speak to the condition of the buildings. The Pennsylvania Economy League presented a very detailed report. This is a summary. Over the last 10 years, the enrollment in this school district has declined by 9%. Over the next 10 years, it's projected to decline another 14%. And there are 2 reasons for this. The first one is that the birth rates are declining in the school district. So there are less babies born than there were in the past. And number 2 is there are less pupils per household. So in any given household, there are less kids generated into the school district. So for those reasons, we're seeing that decline. So here that is graphically, and you'll see the line down the center. Current enrollment is 2,458. We rate the capacity of all of the schools combined at 3,571. That is how we got the number 1113, 1,113 in excess capacity. Over the next 10 years, we project a 14% decline. That means in 10 years, we project the district-wide enrollment at 2,114, and of course that means that the excess capacity will increase to 1,457. Well, let's look at that by grade level configuration. So your school district is configured K to 4, 3 elementary schools, 5 to 8, the building that you're in, and 9 to 12 is the high school next door. When we rate the capacity of an elementary school, we count only the regular classrooms. So there's a teacher in the classroom, the Teacher has 20 to 24 kids in a classroom, and that's what we count as capacity. So the kids take music, they take art, gym, there's a library, computers, all of that stuff. They do that, but that doesn't count as capacity in an elementary school. This school district strives to keep the lower grade levels smaller class sizes. So kindergarten and first, they strive to achieve 18 to 22 kids where that's possible. Second, third, and fourth, 20 to 24 kids. So you can see we need to have a little bit of extra capacity in these schools just to keep the class sizes down. Here are the three elementary schools. Willow Creek currently has 500 children. We rate the capacity of Willow Creek at 800 students. So the school can take more kids. That said, we counted 7 full-size classrooms that are not used for capacity at all, or music or art or any of those other specials. Those are rooms that are specifically set aside for pupil support services and special ed services. One of the precepts in this district is that we will not impact the pupil support and special education services. So a lot of times school districts get put in a pinch and they try and shrink their buildings to the smallest number of buildings possible, and in doing so they cannibalize the special ed and pupil support rooms. The school district has, one of their precepts is that they will not impact the quality of pupil support and special education students in the interest of trying to condense the students into smaller space. The second school is Andrew Mayer. There are 202 students at Andrew Mayer. We rate the capacity at 375 students, and they have 6 full-size classrooms over and above that that are dedicated to special education and pupil support. Richmond has 135 kids with a capacity of 250, and they have 4 full-size classrooms. So take that thing all together, that's 837 kids in a capacity of 1425. So you can see there's a pretty healthy percentage of the capacity in these schools that is not fully utilized at this time. And that's what that looks like. Here's 837, that's this year. And with the rated capacity at 1425, the difference is 588 kids. Over the next 10 years, Pennsylvania Economy League projects that the K-4 population in 10 years will be at 747. So it's not a great increase, but it's a continued increase in capacity and reliable. So the condition of these buildings, we did Forum 1 in Willow Creek. It's beautiful. It's, although I'm tempted to say it's a new school, it's actually 10 years old. So it has a few things that need to be addressed. It has 32.5 acres. That does not include, I think it's 14 or 16 acres across the road used for athletics. So it's 14 plus 32 acres, a lot of land. 105,537 square feet, and over the next 5 years they're targeting $500,000 to seal up some leaks in the masonry panels, and with new caulking or new sealant, and converting some of the older lighting into energy efficient LED lighting. That will actually help with some of the operating costs. Andrew Mayer is in good condition. The site is 12.3 acres. The building's 49,473, and the district targets $100,000 for miscellaneous work. There's some cracks in the masonry and some cracks in the sidewalks and paving repair that needs to be done. One comment about Andrew Mayer is the school is a multi-level school, so some of the accessibility issues in an older school, and it is a little bit older, some of the accessibility issues are non-conforming based on today's code. So do they have to be changed? No, they do not. But at some point, when there's a renovation of the building, a lot of the barriers to getting around in the building will need to be upgraded for accessibility. Richmond Elementary is in fair condition. It sits on 16 acres of land, and the building itself is $35,645. This building has $2 million in identified renovation costs on the horizon. Those include some work on the site utilities. That building is septic system and well water. The mechanical electrical systems are in need of some work and renewal for site paving and replacement of some floor finishes, and that will require some asbestos removal. All right, on to this building, 5 to 8, the grades 5 to 8. When we rate the capacity of a middle school is we count regular classrooms, but then we also count the special classrooms because the kids are moving now period by period on a schedule. And the way educational planners rate the capacity of a secondary school is with the utilization factor. So you know that the classrooms are not 100% occupied every period of the day. The utilization factor takes that into account. So if there are 8 periods in a day and a classroom might be empty 1 period out of 8 every day, sometime or another. So we use a utilization factor to get a better understanding of the capacity of the school. We count each of those rooms, whether it's family and consumer science or it's tech ed or it's gym. We count all of those classes and add the utilization rate. We apply the utilization rate at 80%, and we rated the capacity of this building that we're in right now at 1,074. The current enrollment is 762. So the 762 kids here this year, 1,074 capacity is an excess capacity of 312. So again, it's comfortable. Like the class sizes, we're not really worried about class sizes as much at the secondary school because the 25 kids in a secondary classroom is perfectly okay. So they're not striving to go to low class sizes in the middle school. So this is indicative of, I think 300 kids could fit in this building. You could get some more kids in here. At year 10, Pell anticipates that the projected enrollment will drop to 647. So the excess capacity versus enrollment is 427 kids. This building is in good condition. It's really in very good condition. This is really a nice building. The middle school, high school, a maintenance building, and the Fleetwood Education Center sit on a campus. The entire campus is 51.8 acres. This is all one big continuous piece of land. This building itself is 174,217 square feet, and the district has identified $2.3 million in investments needed in this building. Some of the rooftop mechanical equipment needs to be replaced. There's some masonry work that needs to be done around the perimeter of the building, and some patching on the sidewalks, and there's some milling and repaving that needs to be done in the parking lots. Now on to the high school. The high school is newer than this building, but it's older than Willow Creek. We count for the high school as a secondary school. We count it the same as the middle school. You count the regular classrooms, the special subjects, and you add a utilization rate. The current enrollment is 859. That's about 80% of the rated capacity of 1,072, and that's what that looks like. So here's the current enrollment, 859. I rate the capacity at 1,072. 213 excess capacity. We anticipate that over the next 10 years, the decline that kind of moves its way through the elementary, then it moves its way through the middle schools, and then finally it gets to the high schools, and at 10 years, the enrollment, we project at 720. It actually gets a little lower than that. It dips a little bit below 700 at about year 5. All right, the needs in this high school. This building itself, the high school building, is 205,000 square feet. It's in good condition. The two big expenses at the high school are going to be the replacement of the heat pumps in the building. So that building is run on a series of heat pumps. There are a lot of them. It's a kind of a distributed system all through the building. And the high school has reached an age where those heat pumps are coming to the end of their useful life, so those will have to be replaced. And you can see that between that and the roof replacement of turf, and some repaving, and replacement of some older lighting with LED, more efficient LED lighting, the total anticipated cost there is $8.6 million. So it's your biggest building. When you work on that building, the money adds up pretty quickly. That's by far the biggest expenditure. It's a little over half of the total is to be invested in that high school building. And then just to speak to the Fleetwood Education Center, the other building that's on this same campus is the former Fleetwood Elementary School. This is over at the corner of Vine and Richmond. And it's in fair condition, $34,708, but the school district has identified $2.2 million over the next 2 to 5 years in mechanical upgrades, some paving, upgrade of the lighting, replacement of floor finishes with some asbestos removal. Okay, let's stop for a second. That's the refresher. That's it for the refresher. Are there any questions on the condition or the enrollment or the capacity? So you always have the option to, well, you know, we like it the way it is, leave it alone. The second one is a K-4 consolidation. This includes discontinuing Richmond Elementary School. The third one is a K-5 consolidation, discontinuing Richmond, but moving the 5th graders into the elementary school and aggregating as much vacant space as possible in the middle school, converting the middle school to a 6-8 configuration. Let's start with no change. Three elementary schools, K-4, Fleetwood Middle School, 5 to 8, high school, 9 to 12. What are the advantages? Well, first of all, your programs are successful, very successful. You have a great school district. It's like, it's not broken, let's not break it. By leaving it as it is, you have the same special education and pupil support programs. Again, very successful programs. They're not broken, don't break them. Same grade configuration, same attendance areas. It's the least disruptive option for students and families. The cons. These are the disadvantages. There's excess building inventory, and that means that that capacity is going to build. So just as a reminder, 1,113 students today, projected to increase to 1,457 in excess capacity. So what does that mean? It means the school district is paying to heat and cool and light and wash and staff and so on of more building inventory than is necessary. So how do you balance your budgets when you have rising costs? You have to either boost revenue, which you have been doing late of years with tax increases or other methods, or cut costs elsewhere. We mentioned the renovation costs. Those renovation costs are total up to $15.7 million. in that 2 to 5 year time frame. And the other con is like, okay, well, we're going to a lot of trouble here to study this, and we haven't made any improvements. So it's like one of the problems of doing a study is, well, okay, we did a study, now let's do something. So implementation, even if you choose the no change option, we still need to explore the long-term lease of the Fleetwood Education Center versus the subdivision and sale, and we'll talk a little bit about those two options. So we want to talk a little bit tonight about those two options. Which do you think would be better? Do you think it would be better to hang on to the land, or do you think it would be better to cleave off a piece of the campus with that building and to put that building into more productive use for another complementary use? The second is to take a breather here and go for, say, 3 to 5 years and then revisit the birth rate and the enrollment in the school district and see, well, you know, that's what Pell had to say 5 years ago. Now what is happening? Are we tracking where Pell said we were going to track, and have some of the conditions changed? Has the birth rate increased? Are families having bigger families today? That's what we need to look at in 3 to 5 years, because that period from 5 to 10 years is based on our best guess on birth rate for those youngest years. And that's really what we're talking about here. Since we're primarily talking about affecting the K to 4 grades, is we need to be looking at that birth rate, because that birth rate is going to affect, in that period from 5 years to 10 years, that's when those kids are going to hit kindergarten and start impacting the K to 4 years. If we were talking about the high school, the birth rate wouldn't be so important, because that's still another 13 years away. Next is to identify strategies to promote development. Now, there is an impediment in this school district because there's lots and lots of open land, but that open land is under agricultural preservation. So while it looks like there's lots and lots of lands, why don't we just put some houses there? Not so easy. Plus, the sewer and water, there's a reason why we don't have sewer and water at Richmond Elementary. That is, there are no sewer and water in that end of the school district. And that is not projected to happen anytime soon. So part of the impediment to development in that portion of the school district is predicated on having public sewer and water. That, frankly, would make that 16 acres of land a lot more popular and valuable for different types of development. And as part of the implementation, then, anything that we cannot identify as renovation costs that can be, I guess shed would be the best word, would be to try and find ways to get other people interested in buildings like Fleetwood or Richmond. If we can get other people interested in those buildings, then we can reduce the amount of renovation costs needed. All right, so let's talk about the Fleetwood Education Center. We see two primary strategies here. One of them is a long-term lease. Long-term lease is similar to what the school district does with the YMCA right now at Willow Creek. The school district has a long-term lease with the YMCA, and then the YMCA takes care of the long-term maintenance costs of their end of the building. So I think I'm right. I think they do not pay a rental for that part of the building. They just are committed to maintain the building over time. So the next step would be to negotiate a long-term lease. That can be through negotiation with tenants that you've already identified, or it could be something like a formal request for proposal process. So there are several ways to go at negotiating a long-term lease, but the school district would retain the grounds and would maintain the grounds so that the land in that part of the site can be used by the school district for other purposes. The other option is to subdivide and sell. So if you took a piece of the campus, that's 51.8 acres, and as they say, land, they're not making it anymore. But nevertheless, if you analyze the zoning together with Fleetwood Borough, you could look to subdivide the property. So this would have to be done in cooperation with Fleetwood Borough because of the zoning that's attributed to the site, and subdivide the property. You'd have to conduct real estate appraisals and then sell the property through a listing or through, again, an RFP type process. It could be auctioned. There are a lot of ways to do that. But I can tell you, many times, I'll anticipate a question. Many times people ask architects, well, you know, what's that property worth? Well, the property is worth what a developer would come in and want to do with the property. So in many ways, the land is more valuable to a developer than the building is. Those small elementary schools, sometimes they get used for things like market rate housing or senior housing. Those developers tend to offer hundreds of thousands, not millions of dollars. So I think that's fair to say is there is not a gold mine in real estate there for the school district. Second option is a K-4 consolidation, and that would be similar except with discontinue Richmond. So Willow Creek and Andrew Mayer would continue as K-4 elementary schools. Fleetwood Middle School would remain 5-8, and the high school 9-12. And this diagram, you probably noticed the capacity line across the top is 250 kids lower. That's for discontinuing Richmond. So now the capacity of the school district without Richmond, we rate at 1175. That's 375 for Andrew Mayer, 800 for Willow Creek. It tightens up these numbers. These enrollments are exactly the same. K-4, 837. 10th year projection, 747. What are the advantages? Operational savings, one less elementary school, things that I said. Less lighting, less heating, less cooling. Somewhat less staffing. And simplifies the elementary schools to 2 buildings. But has the same special education and pupil support configuration, same grade configuration, and there's still, backing up one slide, there's still sufficient excess capacity here that there's no problem with going to smaller class sizes. There are plenty of classrooms available to hit those smaller, even down to 18 kids in kindergarten and first, and 20 kids in second, third, and fourth. If you want to keep those class size smaller, this scenario still has plenty of excess capacity to do that. The disadvantages, those needs for renovations at Richmond still remain. Those can be pushed out. So a lot of the mechanical, electrical needs are leading to things like loss of environmental control. It gets cold, it gets hot in the school and individual classrooms. A lot of those mechanical needs, those can be delayed. So you can push off some of the renovation costs, but you don't get rid of them completely unless you get rid of the building completely. Second item is the projected K-4 capacity continues to rise. So as you know, that K-4 enrollment is projected to continue to drop. And by the time you get to the end, the third point here is by the time you get to the end of that 10-year district-wide capacity is still excess capacity at 1,207. That's a little bit more than it is today. So, you know, today you have a lot of excess capacity, 1,113. Well, at the end of 10 years, you're pretty much in that same situation capacity-wise. So 10 years from now is there could be another decision to make going forward. It's like, well, what does the enrollment look like at that time? But that's 10 years from now. Implementation, find the dividing line between the two attendance areas. So this one still has two attendance areas, and adjust the line between Willow Creek and Andrew Mayer to get the attendance areas balanced. Explore the long-term lease versus subdivision and sale for the Fleetwood Education Center. And then explore alternative uses for Richmond. So I think that's there. I would draw a distinction here. As I would say, I would look at Fleetwood at this time for potential sale, but I would look at Richmond at this time for a potential alternative use. And then any of the renovation costs that remain will need to be conducted over the next 5 years. And when I say alternative uses, remember that we had a whole involved dialogue. We probably spent an hour on this, just talking amongst ourselves, and gathered a lot of good ideas for things that would be a good fit for a discontinued elementary school in the district. The first one, these are kind of grouped. The early intervention preschool might be a at-risk kids kind of Head Start kind of preschool. Early childhood education center might be a commercial daycare. A school-age child care program, I think you have that now at the YMCA. School-age child care is before and after school programming for the kids in the district. Alternative education center, so that might be a pull-out type program for kids that need special attention or behavioral help to get back on track and get back into regular ed classrooms. Wellness clinic, Harrisburg just did this. They sold one of their buildings. It became a counseling center from a commercial counseling service. It could be Adults with Disabilities program, partnership with colleges. There were several mentioned, Alvernia, RAC, the community college, Reading Area Community College, and other local schools. Kutztown, partnering with one of the locals to offer adult education or higher education, even degree program classes at that site. Or collaborate with corporations, do a corporate conference center or a corporate collaboration for things like internships or training center. All right, the third option is the K-5 consolidation, and I think there were 3 tables that mentioned, well, why don't we return the 5th graders to the elementary schools if we have so much room in the elementary schools? And I think this was said as a way to fill the capacity so that the all 3 of those elementary schools would remain open. And my take on that was we analyzed it. Yes, that is true. That would do a lot to fill the capacity in those elementary schools. But it would be to shift, and as you'll see here, that will be to shift the excess capacity and aggregate it here in this middle school building. So we'll look at what that does. But I looked at that from the perspective of discontinuing Richmond. And one of the things that we learned when we did that was if we were to consolidate the K-5 in an effort to discontinue Richmond, that the Pell tells us that we know the current enrollment's 999 K-5, and Pell projects that the K-5 enrollment at year 10 would be 907. By the time you get out here, now you have enough excess capacity that you could consider that in 2 schools. That's kind of a 10th year option. This is, in my opinion, this is a little too tight over here. So when you want to keep the class sizes small and you want to have a little wiggle room in case there's a bubble of enrollment increase for whatever reason, then I think this one's a little bit tight. And as you can see, the capacity of the middle school stays at 1074, but for 6 to 8, there are 600 kids today, and then that enrollment declines over the next 10 years to 487. So, frankly, this suggests that the school would be about a third excess capacity, but by here there's more excess capacity than there is kids. So it's, oftentimes we say this, we'll say, okay, well, how can we aggregate some of this space so we can use it for something else? Well, what were you thinking? These were some of the alternative uses. I'll come back to the pros and cons. These were some of the alternative uses that the community talked about in Forum 1. The first one was a cyber school, although a brick and mortar cyber school sounds like a oxymoron. Actually, when a district does a cyber school, there's a classroom component that is orientation to the equipment and tutoring for kids that need the extra help. So it isn't just here's your computer, go home and be in a cyber school. As when school districts do cyber schools, they require a place in the district. The second would be a regional charter. And I think the concept here, as I understood it from the dialogue last time, was, well, why don't we do something that will be a regional draw where kids from districts throughout the area would be interested. Well, that sounds very much like the Fine Arts and Performing Arts Charter in downtown Harrisburg as the CASA program, Creative or CASA. Anyway, CASA has a program that's a charter school, and it attracts kids from school districts all throughout Dauphin County. And that could be a concept, was you have an auditorium here, you have nice music rooms and art rooms, and the wood shops, scene shops, costume. This could be a site for a regional performing arts charter. Someone suggested a 13th year special education transition. Another group suggested an adults with disabilities program, as kind of knit those two ideas together, and it could be a 13th year transition and adults with disabilities program here in a portion of this building. This could be a wellness clinic. There are 2 full-size gyms in the building, and this could be a wellness clinic, and it could be together with things like a fitness center, health club kind of concept that would utilize some of the duplicate, you have a lot of duplicate stuff in here, 2 art rooms, 2 gyms, 2 family and consumer science rooms, etc. There was an idea for a immigration orientation services. And that might be language programs. I think part of it was wellness, so immunizations and that kind of thing. That's my recollection of that item. Also, collaborating with higher education. Same thing as we talked about for the Richmond Elementary School was, can we block off a part of the building and look at this? Now, one of the programs that's offered here in the school district now is partnering with higher education to offer advanced placement type classes at the high school. Could there be a place in the district where you could do both things, as you could offer advanced placement type courses and partner with a higher ed institution so that people from the community can take classes at the same time that students from the high school are taking AP classes through those higher education institutions. It could be a community center concept, like there's some community center function currently in Fleetwood Education Center, or the community library. There was some talk of pulling the community library into a bigger, newer facility from the community center. There's a second kitchen, so there's a potential for catering. There's a kitchen here, and then there's a kitchen on the other end of the school. And so it could be an area of the school that could be used for culinary classes or catering. It could actually be a business opportunity for kids to do internships. Or it could be partnering with, same thing, corporate conference center or corporate collaborations. But we're talking about approximately a third of this school. So if you're familiar with the building is kind of a series of floor plan O's. And it's relatively easy to isolate individual sections of the building. It's not perfect, but there are opportunities in this building to isolate areas of the building sufficiently for safe use of the building for other than middle school regular day programming. All right, let's go back for a sec. So K-5 consolidation, what were the pros? Same thing, operational savings from one less elementary school. I think some people were interested in seeing that fifth grade. It's like fifth grade is more compatible with elementary than it is with secondary. And the other pro is that you can aggregate some of the excess space in vacated space in the middle school. We would have to be disciplined about it, but then you could vacate some of the rooms, and I would suggest the ones on the very far end of the building from here and aggregate them for alternative use. The negatives here, this, I wouldn't say that it's not broken, why break it, but you would definitely have to retool. So to go back to a K-5, this district used to be in a K-5, to go back to a K-5, that's a lot of work, is trying to figure out how to make the special education and pupil support services work for a K-5 versus a K-4, and for a 6-8 versus a 5-8. That takes a lot of thought that has to be done at the administrative level to make that work correctly and knit back together. It will impact your transportation planning. The projected middle school capacity is also a concern. Did I put that chart in here? That's a lot of kids. That's a lot of excess capacity. So when you get a middle school that is at 487 kids in 3 grades, is your ability, some of the ability to do some of the programming that you want to do, is you start to lose some of the efficiencies of full-time use, especially when you have like 2 gyms in a building. 487 kids don't need 2 gyms, for example. So there are some efficiencies that you're losing in the building by taking the kids out. And lastly, as I pointed out from the diagram, the K-5 with smaller class sizes. If you want to use smaller class sizes in the K-5, they're really tight in 2 elementary schools. So that would really, if you wanted to do a K-5 configuration here, is I would not recommend closing Richmond and doing a K-5 configuration. So I think that's that's one of the flaws in this strategy. Now, to implement this very similar to the K-4, we would still look at Fleetwood Education Center, explore the alternative use for Richmond Elementary. We looked at that list before. Reconfigure the attendance areas, we talked about that for the K-4. Repurpose the portion that we can aggregate in the existing middle school, and then now we would be tight on those K-5s. We would want to revisit the birth rate and enrollment in 3 to 5 years to make sure that we have enough room for the kids that are coming, and address all of the other 5-year renovation needs. We talked about that list already. So those were the three options that we had. Are there any questions on the three options before we talk about our small group discussion?